Thank you for joining us, folks. We're just admitting people to the webinar, and we'll be getting officially started in just a moment. All right. Good evening, everyone. And thank you very much for joining us here tonight. Before we begin, I would like to draw your attention and express our gratitude to our ASL interpreter for the evening, Kevin. I will also point out that imperfect auto-generated subtitles are available by pressing the CC button at the bottom of the screen. And I'll just quickly put that in the chat for your reference also. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator at McNally Robinson Booksellers. I'm coming to you from my living room in Winnipeg, surrounded by books, movies, and 3 paintings of stern society ladies on the wall behind me. A peace lily looms over my head. I'm a middle-aged white man with red hair, wearing glasses, a blue sweater, and a maroon t-shirt beneath. We're broadcasting from Treaty 1 territory. That's the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. Our host for this evening, Suzette Mayr, is on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples. The land is home to the Métis, and most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. Brampton also resides within Treaty 19, 1818, and that is where Suzette is. We are gathered here virtually to celebrate the launch of M. Patchwork Monoceros's debut poetry collection, Remedies for Chiron, published by the good folks at Radiant Press. We're so very grateful to Radiant for helping to make this book and this evening a possibility. This evening will feature a reading and a conversation hosted by Scotiabank Giller Prize-winning author, Suzette Mayr. Just a few very quick housekeeping notes before we begin. The first is that there will be a reading, followed by a conversation, and after that, there'll be an opportunity for all of you to ask questions. You can do so simply by writing your questions in the Q&A box, which is just at the bottom of the screen. Keeping all the questions there will make them very straightforward to find. You'll also notice that we have live chat enabled for this evening too. So if you have any question or any comments or any positive words for Melanie over the course of the evening, please do feel free to write them there, and I'll be sure to pass it along to them once the evening is through. The final thing I will say is that I'd encourage you to purchase copies of Remedies for Chiron. As you can imagine, we have quite a few at our store right now, and there's some purchase information in the chat for you right now. But that is more than enough of my dry housekeeping notes. In the astrological tradition, Chiron represents our deepest wound and our lifelong efforts to heal it. Remedies for Chiron is a collection of poems that journey through the days of a young, queer, Black, and newly disabled poet, trying to find a place to root and exist in the entirety of those intersections. Moving between cycles of grief and self-discovery, Remedies tells the story of a prismatic existence, while also offering a balm for the hurts we all experience and the humility that comes with healing. Its author, Melanie, or M. Patchwork Monoceros, known by some as Patch, is a poet and interdisciplinary artist, exploring polysensory production and somatic grief through text, style, and film. Their work considers a collective queer and crip consciousness by connecting to marvelous bodies living with complexity as sick or disabled. A Black creator of Jamaican Taino Arawak ancestry, Monoceros lives with their 4-legged menagerie, Onion, Dax, Hoa, and Essen in Treaty 1, also known as Winnipeg, Manitoba. Your host for this evening, Suzette Mayr, is the author of 6 novels, including her most recent, The Sleeping Car Porter, winner of the 2022 Scotiabank Giller Prize and longlist nominee for the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction, as well as the Republic of Consciousness Prize. It is a tremendous book. Mayr's other novels, including one of my personal favorites, Dr. Edith Vane and the Hares of Curly Hall, have won the Relit Award and the City of Calgary W.O. Mitchell Book Prize, and been nominated for the Commonwealth Prize for Best Book in the Canada-Caribbean region, the Writers Guild of Alberta's Best First Book and Best Novel Awards, and the Pharaoh Grumley Award for LGBT fiction. She is a former president of the Writers Guild of Alberta. Mayr teaches creative writing at the University of Calgary. And we'll be hearing from Suzette in just a few moments, but for now, please join me in welcoming M. Patchwork Monoceros.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Suzette Mayr. I'm joining you from a hotel room with a gray patterned wall and wooden bed frame behind me, as well as gray curtains and a window to the side. I am a feminine looking Black woman with shoulder length black hair with gray streaks in the front, and I am wearing dark red lipstick and a black long sleeve cardigan sweater. I am so happy to be part of this event, the launch of Remedies for Chiron by M. Patchwork Monoceros. Remedies for Chiron is a stunning book of poetry. It's funny, it's tragic, it's body and body, body spelled B-O-D-Y and body spelled B-A-W-D-Y. It's so sharp and so vivid. It's impossible to read this book and just stand back as an observer. Patch, as the writer, pulls the reader in a visceral, whole way. And it's such a delight to talk with you today, Patch, about your magnificent book. Congratulations and big virtual hugs to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, my heart is very overflowing. I am Patch. I'm a late 30s Black agender person. I have a lot of texture in my images, and I'm a little study that is dark maroon colored with built-in wood shelving behind me. I'm wearing a gold lame dress with pink and blue tights. I have purple glasses and a orange and black head wrap. I have lots of bits of jewelry on my face and in my hands and around my wrists. And there's some quilts beside me, and there's probably going to be an animal or two before the night is through.
Would you like to start with a short reading and then we can have a chat about this excellent book?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is a very overwhelming experience. I'm such an admirer of yours, and I'm so grateful to you and everyone at McNally, John and Deborah at Radiant, and just wanted to say thank you before I get going for making this night happen. This is a real thing that's happening, everybody. All right, this is my book, because I have a book. And the poems I wanted to start with are the kind of entry points to each chapter. So I'll be reading the intro poems first, and then we'll continue. One, injury, illness, impact. 3 to 5 drops of silence, broken into truth. Take as needed. 2, wound, weakness, worry. Boil 1 cup of fresh tears. Add dried leaves of family tree. Steep for 1 lifetime. Drink. 3, bloodletting. Sprinkle 3 handfuls, brick red sand from the homeland, on sheets at night. Sleep. 4, scab, pick, scab. Gather seeds of promise, chew 1 for each broken bough, water to germinate. 5, scar, heal, grow. Untether soul strings, stretch fingers, toes, mouth, eyes. Scream and breathe, repeat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. I can't wait to talk about this book with you. So let's start off with you, if this is okay with you, telling us how this book came about. So you're a very talented interdisciplinary artist. You work in textiles and film, in addition to poetry, for example. And I always wonder, I'm always curious about how interdisciplinary artists slash writers who are fluent in multiple artistic media, what draws an interdisciplinary artist to you, like you, to one medium over the other? So in other words, what drew you to poetry compared to, say, textile or film as a medium of expression for this project? What inspired you to write this book?
I find a lot of like pleasure and inspiration and curiosity and healing and kind of navigating the chaotic energy that's in my brain. And so poetry as a form feels like my language. It feels like how I speak. It feels like the sometimes outlandishly large words that I use in my lifetime sometimes land better in poetry than they might in a conversation. I feel my quilting and all of my textile, specifically my textile and writing work, feels very interconnected because I kind of do them in tandem to support each other a little bit. And for this collection, I had been in a filmmaking residency, and so I had a lot of like film on the brain. It's about 5 years ago, and was really struggling with long sentences and narrative and making a film in the circumstances that I was in. And so instead went back and started looking at my old poems and building a different relationship with them because I've been very, I don't know, sort of like dissuaded out of exploring poetry in this way just because of like the difficulties of not having an MFA or like being a certain kind of demographic of a person or having different barriers and things. And I have a very literal neurodivergent mind. And so I had wanted to write about a specific period of time, but then I couldn't write about that specific period of time without being in really over extreme minute detail. And so I said, let's go back and look at what was written during that time and kind of meet there and start.
Oh, that's wonderful. You've kind of you scooped my next question, which was I was going to ask you about the process of writing the book and how long it took you, but I guess we can talk about that a bit later. So the book has a really evocative title, a really wonderful title that could be interpreted in so many ways. And I know the title is really important regarding the poetic reflections, and I would say, creative analyses that are braided throughout the collection. So for example, body sensations, the sensory, mental health, ableism, just a few of those topics. Can you talk about the title?
There are most of my years of life don't feel like they were healable. Some of the traumas that were experienced in my childhood and onwards and things didn't feel like they were things that I'd be able to live with in a full and not super despondent way. And because a lot of what I'm writing about is about my mom in this book, and because that particular wound happened so early, I kind of have like many cycles of feeling, okay, maybe I'm going to approach this for healing. Oh, that didn't feel very good. Or maybe I'm going to build a relationship with this kind of person. No, that didn't kind of fell through. And I don't wish my experience on anyone, but it's a very lonely thing to not have other people in your life that have lost a parent at a young age. And so building kind of like a relationship with astrology and kind of witchcraft and ghosts and thinking about the nonlinear, began a kind of healing that I hadn't anticipated, in terms of like, oh, I can actually go back and like have like a reinvigorated kind of correspondence with the story that I was telling myself for a long time. And so in one of the poems, I speak about the script that I have about when people ask about my mom. And kind of coming back and thinking about them as remedies, and all these poems that I wrote when I was 19, 20, 23, as like this recipe book almost of things that I was doing to heal myself that I didn't know I was doing to heal myself at the time. And then with Chiron being the wounded healer, and just being a kind of presence in my astrological chart, it felt important to name this as something that could be talking to that hurt.
Can you talk a little bit more about what it's, how to write grief, or how you wrote it? Because, you know, that's interesting. You talk about the script of what you would tell people, and the whole idea of a recipe book or remedies. Like, so how did you approach writing poems about grief, very personal grief, knowing that it would be, you know, you'd be sending those poems out into the world to people who didn't know your mother, and who, you know, yeah. Can you just talk about that?
The first poem I remember writing, I was 9 years old, and it was about my mom, and how I had all these questions about what her life was like, and why I didn't know those things about her. And it was just kind of an instinctual writing, and it was sad, but it wasn't feeling, I didn't feel like I was like writing like a, you know, mournful sonnet or something like that. And I liked it. And so I shared it with my grade 4 teacher, and she burst into tears in the classroom. And I remember looking up at her and seeing this adult who was like in my care respond so emotionally to the thing that I was experiencing, that I was not responding to that in that way. And I learned, oh, okay, this feels normal to me. They don't like that. They don't like hearing kids say these things, or talk about these things, or talk really deeply about their feelings. And so my poetry on the outside, you know, into later, you know, teenager and things like that, was a lot more vague than what I was, say, writing at home. And that really impacted how I felt about sharing them at all, because it felt like they were just therapy, or this is like not something that you would say out loud, or something like that. And it's through, I lived in Toronto for a long time before living in Winnipeg, and was exposed to a lot of people sharing poetry and sharing different different things that they'd written about or created about their own grief experiences, and finding that there are people that won't respond like my grade 4 teacher did, that they'll want to hear what are in those words. And because it's always been a very lonely experience, writing it down has felt like this existed. If no one else saw what is happening, if no one else saw what this feeling is, it exists on this paper. And that kind of takes it out of my you know, my fascia.
So it's like a record of sorts.
Yeah.
Or
Mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
yeah. Can you talk about you talked about this is so interesting what you've just said. Can you talk about magic or spirituality as you've written about them in the book? Because that's, I'm hearing a lot of that from what you're saying. And somebody's also asked in the Q&A, and I know we're not supposed to look at those questions until later, but I think it just works so great here. Somebody asked, what is your Chiron placement?
Oh my goodness. I know that VJ is in the chat, and I know that, I feel like VJ knows more. Badge, if you know where my Chiron is, can you put it in the chat?
Okay, we'll go to the other part of the question. So can you talk about the element of magic or spirituality as you've written about them in the book?
I was a weird kid. I like making up spells and creating potions and thinking about ghosts. And I'm like a lifelong depressed person, and so it was just thinking a lot about what I didn't get to experience, or what my mom didn't get to experience me growing through. And when I was like 12 or 13 until 17, I had numerous sightings of a particular bug, when I was having like overly emotional experiences, or I was feeling really lonely, or I was missing my mom a lot, or I was like, Chiron and Gemini in the 11th house, thank you. And when that would happen, this little creature would appear in, I'd open a newspaper and it'd be in the crease. I would go to open the window and it'd be kind of like hanging out in the screen. And I started to ponder the idea that that might have been my mom just being like, hey, I'm cool, you're here, I'm here, you're good, I'm not here, I'm just not here. And I wouldn't say my family's like especially like overly religious, but like we do talk about kind of, you know, I grew up being told that she's watching me and like she's around and she's never gone and things like that. And to me, that feels very, I feel like it feels more spiritual than religious, because I feel like it's a big, I'm sure there's lots to do in the afterlife. And so, yeah, like having the idea that she was kind of around didn't feel resonant until those bugs started showing up. And then I started building kind of like a relationship with that insect, and just like believing that we were connected in that way, and that feels true to now. And so then when I started learning more about like astrology and hoodoo and all these kind of different ways of being in relationship to the non-material, it just kind of was like there's actually so many like phone lines to not be alone in this grief experience. And in 2015 was when I had my first experience with a medium. And that changed a lot of my understanding of my relationship with my mom and where we were at and how to talk to each other, and what I imagined was kind of like possible in the afterlife. So yeah, I feel like it's just been a gift to not have to feel like she's actually gone, completely unable to be witness to my life. It's just finding different ways to like engage with that witness.
So is writing this book a form of magic?
Yeah,
Is it a spiritual act?
very much. It feels like a prayer for sure.
Prayer.
Yeah, there's a lot of me's in here that didn't think that they would survive to now, and weren't interested in it, and they did. So it feels like a magic book that way.
Somebody is asking, what bug was it? And
It's a ladybug.
A ladybug, of course. And I'm gonna just follow that up, because you know, you write about animals a lot in this book. I mean, there's, you know, and you talk about your animals, you have animals around you even now. There are several poems that feature animals, you know, companion animals, like the dogs you have to let out and let in, the cats that have to be fed. But then there are also images of a bird with crushed wings, you know, a rocking horse made out of granite, cockroaches, Cheshire cat moons. And of course, there's always Chiron, who's half person, half horse. Can you talk about animals?
When I was growing up, I did not know that I was autistic. I know that now. I didn't know that the kind of interest and connection that I felt with animals was something that I could be proud of, or something that I could kind of like nurture and actually like have an exchange back and forth with. I always just was the kid who was like, oh, where's the dog? With that person. Where's the cat? Oh, with that person. Oh, that dog barks at everybody else, not with that person. And that just felt kind of like a special connection. And animals don't lie in the way that people do. And they experience life cycles and mortality in a kind of a more open way than I feel like humans do. And I feel like they also grieve in a more open way than I've experienced humans. And so, as is in the book, like there's a lot of loneliness and a lot of isolation and just not feeling connected to people or connected to myself for most of my life. And consistently non-human things, whether that be um, constellations, animals, birds, bugs, plants, um, felt like a kinship because there wasn't a falsity. I didn't have to not be the things that I were in that moment. Um, and I've talked about this before, but I don't have like a natural, like happy experience. Like it's not like I don't wake up with like huge grins on my face or whatever. And like it go like a long time without feeling like overjoyed or whatever. But I can always rely on a non-human thing or an animal specifically to like tickle joy for me. And that's just a thing I want to be able to give back to them. So that's why I kind of think about them so much.
And that's why they appear over and over again. But some of them are definitely in distress
Yeah.
or mythic. There's somebody in the Q&A, Gem Hall, is asking, you speak a lot about feeling connected to non-human beings. Do you feel like there's a relationship between disability and taking solace in interconnectedness beyond the human world?
Very, 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 very much. Thank you, Jem. Hi, Jem. Very much. I mean, as soon as one has the experience of being disabled in the world that we have, we experience becoming unhuman to the people around us that aren't in supportive relationship with that part of us. So, you know, we lose access to housing, medical stuff, benefits, family, relationships, the outside. And my experience of being disabled has been very mm, kind of like spectral in the course of my lifetime. And I think too about the just like the animals not lying part and like feeling like um, there's a way that there's the way that I appreciate that animals adjust to the changes in their body as well. And for me, in my understanding of like biology, they've been here for a lot longer doing survival in ways that have more consistent than humans have been, if that makes sense. Um, and yeah, so I just feel like there's like a lot of wisdom um, and pathos in that experience with them. I don't know if that.
Yet in the collection, there's a poem all about cockroaches and how disgusting they are and wanting to get rid of them. So
It's true. I
that's
feel
just
both things.
the contradiction. You talked about family, and I know you reference some great writers and artists in the book as other kinds of mothers. For example, you talk about June Jordan, Audre Lorde, Octavia Butler. Is there any one specific artist among the ones who've helped you write this book, whom you feel has influenced your work the most? And can you talk about why or how?
So Audre Lorde is like in this painting, but both behind me, it's kind of a collage poster by Alexis Pauline Dumbs. So I didn't have a lot of like Black cultural touchstones growing up in like Whitby, Ontario, and didn't feel like I had the right to a lot of Black culture, including like authors and musicians, everything like that. And then when I moved away from home and started meeting more queer people and more people of color and things like that, was very early on introduced to Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks and June Jordan, but very specifically remember reading Zammy by Audre Lorde and being like just so and I was like maybe 17 or something like that, 17, 18. And so just feeling like you can put this, like you can say this much truth about yourself. You can make up your own name. You can change how you kind of like present yourself to be the most whole version of yourself. Um, and can do that while not being surrounded by people that look like you or not working with people that look like you, like she writes about. And so Audre Lorde is such a huge, huge, huge touchstone and like grounding figure for me, especially as someone who is also disabled by illness and um, built community built a care community to be able to still do what she was called to do until she couldn't. It's just, yeah, like a really meaningful inspiration for me. And the other big element for her is my name translated is Black Unicorn. So Melanie Monoceros is Black Unicorn, and that's obviously one of her books. So
Interesting. That's yeah. No, she's a magnificent writer, definitely. And I definitely I can see all of these writers in your work. Audre Lorde, June Jordan, Octavia Butler, so easily, so easily. There is a question in the chat, and I'm going to, if you're okay with it, I'm going to ask you to read a couple more pages after this question, just because I know I really think your poetry is just so lovely. So Afua is asking, can you expand on your comment about disability and becoming spectral? How that influenced your existing relationship with witchcraft, the spiritual world, and conjuring worlds?
I didn't grow up with an understanding of disability justice or disability lived experience, really, in the way that I would come to know it. And so I was just as influenced by like white supremacist ableism conceptions of what a disabled life could be, and was very lucky that kind of my evolution into a more disabled body was also surrounded by queer people and trans people of color who were also disabled and chronically ill and had been for a long time. And it was kind of in with how I experience disability is I have a lot of different chronic illnesses, and they're kind of described as like dynamic disabilities or episodic disabilities because it's not the same version of a symptom all the time. And when I think about kind of like the spectral of experience, like here I'm going with the hands, but like there's like this kind of middle area where we are on the ground, on the earth, and then there's just above us like this like astral place where spirits are and like other ethereal connections, and then we have like this like very rootedness beneath us. And when you're kind of tapped into that, I feel like it's impossible not to be expansive because of how matter and atoms move on each of those different planes. And so when I think about being like grounded in disability, like maybe I know what my diagnosis is, I know what treatments help or things like that. That feels like roots, and roots like spread. And on the surface, there's a lot more obstacles. And so there's a lot more navigating around barriers and people and toxins and things like that that might interrupt that kind of expansiveness. But then we get up into the sky again, and there's just a lot more space. And I feel like having a dynamic or like an episodic disability also like moves you through. You're like grounded. I know what's up. I know what's happening. This is okay. That doesn't work anymore. And now I have to go up and get new meds or get a new appointment or get a whole new diagnosis. And I'm navigating barriers, even though I know what my truth is. I know what I need. The surface has barriers that maybe the sky and the ground don't.
Yeah. Can you read us a couple of pages of poetry? And can I put in a special request?
Yes.
My favorite one is the one about, I think it's a bean and mashed potatoes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And then I'm going to just remind the audience, feel free to put questions in the Q&A. I've been posing them as we go because they've just been so wonderfully organic. But if you have questions, please don't hesitate.
Thanks for that. So I'm gonna start with the first poem in the book, and then I have a couple others, and I'm gonna go to the one that you that you like.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. The M word. Sometimes just writing or reading the word mother, a throbbing between my ears, sudden void replaces the ground beneath me. Even with no further discussion of meaning or representation, the word just lay there on the page. 6 Anglo-assembled letters swallow my throat and sting my eyes, fall across the screen, the page, the air just beyond my lips. Mother, I utter, contribute to my own flagellation. This next one is called An Education. And there's a content note for reference of sexual violence and racialized violence. An education. Institutional ignorance releases slivers of my teeth as I grind my molars into dust Monday to Thursday. Week 1. Establish yourself as an oddity, a lone black bean submerged in a dish of mashed potatoes. Week 1. Sadness, pure and irrefutable at the life I have landed in, the life that is not the one I had so carefully planned for. Louise Erdrich on the CBC, 1 in 3 Native women will experience some sort of sexual violence, she said. I don't know the statistics of Black women, but I bet it's not far behind. I hate living this way. Every occasion of me walking after dark stimulates my nighttime refrain, don't get raped, don't get raped, don't get raped, don't get raped. Week 2. Every school day, my body engages, tenses at trying to defend myself against the subtle attacks of downpression that rain upon me and around me in this institution based on ignorance, marauding as an education. Vacancies. First, the crash. Century-old plaster, rot, debris crumbling upon my surprised self. Me, an unsuspecting McSmuffet, usurped again whilst in the low rent throes of urban center adulting. Then, the bone. Decayed remnants of an upstairs guest, or hidden fortune of a ferreting visitor squirreled away for later ingestion, only to be lost, deserted, ignored by beady eyes, and raptured instead by glimmering refuse. There are people in the chat that remember that apartment. Sad clown, saxophone. This poem has references to alcohol. New Year's morning, makeup and hair still done. Instead of hot queer, I read saxophone. I woke up in all my clothes under the sheets with the lights on. I'm tucked in and there's no one to have done it but me. Still drunk, only slept for 5 hours, but the morning is beast time. Dog out, dog in, water, tea, Tylenol, pats, cats, back to bed. New Year's night. Showered, sweats, more tea, toast, back to bed. All clean except for the saxophone remnants on my pillow. Composed using Dragon Dictate, which interpreted sad clown as saxophone. This next one is called Cheshire Cat Moon. Cheshire Cat Moon rests her dents on the lens of my specs, a tiny glimmer, a hint above my rims, eyes instead focused on the road just ahead of my handlebars. How much time? I have another one that I
Sure. Go for it. Yeah.
seeking Afrotopia. Things that are hard. Living with someone who hates you. Every day, often multiple times, you are assured that there is something so abhorrent about your very existence that the person you share space with is compelled to avoid you in any way. Every time your body nears theirs, your movement creates noise, or your presence is detected. Their scoff, grimace, recoil heralds you as a villain. Villains who don't deserve to have their side heard. Villains' needs don't deserve to be cared for. Villains are selfish and don't deserve anything they want. Living with someone who hates you is hard because the fragility of silence depends on soundproofing made of ash and disturbed by a breath or a footstep. Living with someone who hates you is hard because their skillful front-facing masquerade assures an omission of outside observation. With every scowl on the staircase or reassertion of object ownership, you're reminded that you are not trustworthy. Every time a mug, a sweater, a snack of theirs appears to be missing, every time a cupboard, shelf, appliance that was once shared becomes separate, you're told you make them feel unsafe. Because no matter your efforts to ghostly float around the periphery of their perception, even when you stop making tea and toast, smoothies, any meals needing more than one pot because you're afraid of forgetting a cup or a fork or a crumpled wrapper behind, of being too ill or worn out to tidy right away, even when you start bringing the takeout directly to your basement room, always asking for extra cutlery, despite the roach odor still off-gassing from your recent infestation and the anxiety that ignites. Even when you push through to do chores that have never fit your capacity, when you carry hefts up and down stairs, vacuum multiple rooms and levels, use products that invite migraines and cognitive breakdowns, even when you start losing weight because you spend more time retracted into yourself, listening for what mood the tone of their footsteps implies, than you do thinking about eating, making any sound, including chewing, begins to feel dangerous and antagonistic. Even when you start pulling out your hair, plucking each one out at the root, running your fingers over the smoothness left behind, leaving piles of perfectly kinked curls on the pillow. Even when there is so little of you left to notice. One glint of eye contact, either wayward or intentional, one meekly raised concern or boundary, dissolves the masterfully renegotiated terms of your will to live. You are horrific. You're so horrific, I don't want your fork on my plate, much less your almond milk and my half and half touching on the same shelf in the fridge. You're so horrific, I am repulsed by even the echo of your corporeal proximity. When you're so small, the indent on your pillow becomes the only proof of your personhood. That I get to move out in a month, in a year, when I'm grown. That I am loved, maybe missed by my cats, by my friends, by my other relatives. That we're both Black, that it's my house too, that they asked me to live here, that they told me to grow up here. None of that matters. Because when you live with someone who hates you, every minute is a performance to placate their hatred. Every hour is a mirror showing the reflection of the parts of you they'll never want. Every day you wonder what happens if your tolerance peaks, but you still can't leave. Every night you go to bed uncertain if the person in the next room would carry you to safety in case of a fire. Every morning you utter under your breath thanks to the universe that you made it through another sleep without your body being left to burn. And then the
Thank
last
you.
one, to shift energies. Sorry. Sorry. Yes. At rest. For Granny. They lay still, quiet, remembering each life they had lived, had warmed with honey throughout their earth lifetime. The crystalline obsidian sand shifted gently underneath their body. Warm licks of salt water flicked their ankles. Just beyond the opening of the hollow where they awaited their transition, a leaping ring of fire kept company with their long legacy of kin, come to make offerings for their journey. Skin thin, soft, and cascading upon itself from age and ascendance. All around their body, beasts and creatures of all sorts push into the aged frame in gratitude for the care received and in support of their coming path. A pack of spirits and guides connected with them since before their earth birth, who will remain after their ancestor ascendants. At their most boundless, most deliberate, most intentional, most cared for, and most whole self, transformed into stardust, particles dispersed on a slumbering sigh, whispers soaring away on the wind atoms rising into ancestor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have just a little bit of time left, and I know that you wanted to talk about the cover in particular. And I think that's your art on the cover.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you made it for the book. Can you talk about that?
I did. Yeah. So one of my textile practices is embroidery. And a number of years ago, when my grandmother was still alive, she was in an accident and was hospitalized for a while. It was stressful and terrible. She recovered, thankfully. And in my visits to see her, I was doing abstract embroidery. And so I would show it to her, and I would sew at the hospital with her, and have memories of her like touching the knots, like, and everything. And I really liked that embroidery, and so I remade a version of that for this, and then did a bunch of flower dyeing and stuff like that to kind of make it for this project. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question. Thank you for that. So I don't do social media, but for you, I broke my own rule and I visited your Twitter account and read a couple of your tweets related to the book. You describe the book as being, quote, poems about dead moms and the Dufferin bus and baby gay makeouts on dance floors of yore, end quote. This description summed it up so perfectly. And is a pretty awesome elevator pitch. And I resonated for sure with the baby gay makeouts on dance floors, that's for sure. What would you ultimately like readers to take away from the book? I know that's a ridiculous question, but people ask me that all the time. I never know how to answer. So I want to know how you answer that question. Is there one thing in particular you want people to take away from this book?
Your grief is your own. And it will take the shape and the healing and the time that it takes. And it's yours. And how others perceive it, or how others feel about it, or how others feel about how you express it, is none of your business, because it's yours. And there's magic in that.
Amazing wisdom. What's next? That's also a terrible question, right? Because your book is like a day old. What's next?
I a couple of days ago made a list of my projects in my 25. I have 25 projects that are just like hanging out in my periphery. I think 7 of them are done. So, so yeah, I'm actually going to be creating some physical works based on the cover, and kind of doing some expanding about the process of how I made the cover with flower dyeing and such. And so there'll be a small photo exhibit later this year to connect with this. I also hope to make some embroidered things just because I like making things that I like to have like a little bit of text and a little bit of text with the project. But as a very much disabled person in a pandemic, nothing is next. Like dessert, these beasts definitely, cozy clothes, and like a same show. This feels very surreal and special and strange. And I'm so grateful that I'm kind of like, don't even have all the words. I love you, and I'm so grateful that we got to meet and that we got to have this like book time together. Like, oh, thank you, universe.
No, it was my pleasure. I love this book so much, and your grief is your own is so. I'm going to carry that with me for sure. And I loved editing this book. It was a huge privilege for me, huge privilege. I just enjoyed it so much, and I wish you every success, with this book. You've already succeeded. You've already magnificent.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I guess we're going to have to wrap up today. John, I don't know if you want to come in now, unless people have any last minute questions that they have to ask.
I wanted to offer too, if folks have questions that don't come up tonight, feel free to follow me on Twitter and you can ask them there, and we can continue the conversation.
Thank you both so very much. It was just a real privilege to be able to sit back and listen to the conversation and the readings. I'm particularly grateful to you, Suzette, for prompting a second reading. So thank you very much for that. This is such a beautiful, generous book. It's a cry of love and a cry of care, both for self and community. So please, wherever you are, please find a way to get a copy in your hands. As I mentioned, we have stacks at McNally Robinson, and we'll be very happily celebrating this book for the next little while. So please do pay us a visit or get in touch with us somehow, and we will find a way to get Remedies for Chiron into your hands. But in addition to the book, it was just such a pleasure to be able to spend the evening with yourself, Suzette. Thank you so very much for your hosting and for asking such insightful and warm questions, and deeply thoughtful ones as well. And of course, to you, M. Patchwork Monoceros, for your work and your own openness too, just in sharing your creative process and the work within its pages, and just so much about yourself as well. It means a lot to myself, and I'm sure everybody watching tonight as well.
Thank you so much.
So I'll just close by finally saying once again, thank you very much to Kevin for ASL interpretation throughout the evening. And of course, too, yes, indeed. It's always so great to work with Kevin, and we're delighted to have him on board for tonight. And thank you to Radiant Press for ensuring that this book could find its way into the world as well. So Remedies for Chiron, thank you all. Have a very good night.
We all say good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you everyone for being here. This was so meaningful. This is a dream come true to be able to share this with you. Thank you for reading me, and thank you for everyone who has come to my readings in the past 15 years. And those poems are on pages now. You can read them for yourselves. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Good night.